I'll call to order this Bloomington Common Council regular session meeting for Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chopra? Here. Piedmont Smith?
Here.
Rallo?
Here.
Volin?
Here.
Sims?
Here.
Sturbaum?
Here.
Sandberg?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here is the agenda summation for this evening. If you'd like an agenda, you can find them beside Clerk Bolden. We'll have approval for minutes of January 30th, 2019 special session, and then we'll have approval of minutes considered for March 6th, 2019 regular session. We'll have reports from council members, the mayor and city offices, and I understand tonight Don Elliott and Jim Sprung, who are with Clarion and Associates, will be giving a status report on the upcoming city's Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO. Then we will have council committee reports. We reserve 20 minutes for the public to speak on items not on our agenda. Then we'll go to appointments to boards and commissions. And then we have one item for legislation for second reading and resolutions. That is Ordinance 1907, amending Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic, regarding updating permissible towing and storage fees for authorized towing services. And it received a committee recommendation of due pass 503. We have no legislation for first reading, and then we'll have an additional time for public comments of 20 minutes at the end of our meeting before we go to council scheduling, and then we will adjourn. So with that, let's move on to approval of minutes. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of minutes from January 30th, 2019 as amended. There were a few typographical errors that I communicated to the clerk earlier today.
Very good, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any additions or corrections to the minutes other than what we've been told? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are accepted.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes of March 6, 2019 regular session.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additions or corrections for those minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to approval? Those minutes are approved as well. Okay, we'll go to council member reports, and I'll begin on my left with Councilmember Sandberg.
I hold in my hand a work that Councilmember Sturbaum and I can be very proud of. This is a very preliminary draft of the Bloomington Affordable Living Committee report. This has been years in the making with respect to our study of local data, our discussions with low-income individuals who are struggling mightily in our community. The title of this is Working Hard, Falling Behind. This study that Councilmember Sturbaum and I initiated, and former Councilmember Mayor also joined us. We started out looking at affordable housing because we felt that was a very critical need. We've been discussing it for decades. But as we started to unpack the issue of affordable housing, we realized that there's more to it than that. It has to do with the wages in this community. It has to do with the cost of transportation, the cost of food, the cost of health care, and the cost of child care. So we expanded the purview of this report, and that's why it's taken a while for us to gather information, to take a look at all of those areas. And again, I took a PTO from my job at SPIA today for a variety of reasons, but picking up this report, I've been glued to it and fascinated by it to remind us of the hard work that's led up, all the interviewing, all the cooperation from all the experts in our community that are knowledgeable about health care and child care and local food service. And so while this is in no means ready to release to the public, it is here, it is substantive, it is exciting, and I'm really thrilled to have it in my hands because I think it's going to be extremely informative to all of us moving forward into the next term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Councilmember Sturbaum, do you have a comment?
Yeah, the American dream of owning a home is not dead. There was a recent survey of millennials working in San Francisco, and 74% of them wanted a home where they could raise children. They didn't plan to live there more than 5 or 10 more years. This generation's just like every other generation. They want homes. People like to live in a lower density. Sometimes the planners think they have better ideas than what people actually want. But we just were talking to Lynn Coyne, and he said, we just lost a business because they found that there wasn't going to be enough housing in the community for their workers, and they're building in Greene County. So we have a lot of work to do, but we also have to be a little humble about what people actually want. And we want to make sure they can find a home and own a home if possible. Sometimes we think we know more than what people actually really need and really want. And a home is a goal, and a home is where you live, and a home is where you operate in your community from. And thinking that everybody is going to be a renter and should live in ever smaller buildings, that's a very depressing future, and I think we can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to do is welcome back our colleague, Councilmember Volan. We've missed you. Glad to be back. And I'll be brief. The next thing I'd like to speak about kind of coattails on what Councilmember Sturbaum is talking about this evening. We will hear a brief, or I understand brief, report from our consultants, Clarion and Associates, having to do with the updating of our Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. We have had public meetings. There have been some participation. I think they have learned some things that they'll continue to work on. I know we've heard some things that we know we'll be working on. I just wanted tonight, to all the folks that are listening and everyone sitting here, please continue to participate in this process. This will guide our growth for the next couple of decades, and there's a lot of discussion to be had about this on the future and how we want to see Bloomington develop and grow. So, and thank you, Mr. President. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Volan?
Thank you. I appreciate the news from my colleagues Sandberg and Sturbaum. It provides context for the story that I want to tell. My father died a month ago at the age of 89. Despite his advanced age, it was unexpected. He was running errands on a Tuesday afternoon when he suffered heart failure not far from his home in Lake County. As a result, I've had a hard time caring about anything here. I know some of my colleagues have endured their own parental losses, and I marvel at how they or anyone manages to find the will to continue. I mean only to explain my absence these weeks, but there's a little Bloomington story that I've never told anyone that didn't make sense to me until now, sitting here in these chambers, having returned to resume my duties, but wondering whether I cared about them anymore enough to resume them. It helps to know for this story that my parents are from a very different world. Both my father's and my mother's first language was Greek. It helps to know that despite his family origins in Greece, my father grew up on the banks of the Blue Nile, that it was his dual Greek and Sudanese citizenship that was the key to him being able to immigrate with my mother permanently to the U.S. It helps to know that Indiana was the place where he was able to begin practice medicine, and Gary was the place in Indiana that welcomed his specialty, and that's how I came to be born there months after he began his practice. My parents loved, among other things, European classical music, and so it was a plus that there was a symphony orchestra in Lake County, and an hour away was the Lyric Opera, which their countrywoman Maria Callas had helped launch a decade before. I remember my first experience there, an 11-year-old in a scratchy, stiff Sunday suit, watching La Traviata before they had super titles and wondering what the hell everyone was screeching about. A lot of people come to Bloomington from Northwest Indiana, including several of our former elected colleagues, Councilmembers Bannock and Satterfield, former Mayor Cruzan. It's an agreeable enough place to live, Lake County. Usually people like us come to Bloomington to go to college, and we just stay. For those of us from the region, this place is far enough away to effectively be another world. My folks had visited here often enough over the years that they knew something about this community, but they never spent much time here. And so it surprised me that one day, sometime around the turn of the millennium, before my parents had grandchildren, when their other children were living all over the country, when they were able-bodied and had not yet anticipated the cruel vagaries of health that would prevent them from enjoying their old age, my mother took me aside and said, "You know, Stephen, if your father dies first, I think I would like to come live with you in Bloomington." A few months later, my father took me aside when I was visiting. He said, "You know, Stephen, if your mother dies first, I think Bloomington might be a nice place to live." Neither of them ever knew that the other had said the same thing to me in confidence. I remember marveling about this at the time, well before my career in this chamber, and wondering what to make of it. I've always hated civic exceptionalism. I hate when people brag about America. I hate when local civic boosters want to proclaim themselves a world-class city. They're probably just wishful thinking. If they have to say it, they probably aren't. Now the meaning of that little story has become clear to me. If you just let the place be, you won't need to brag about it for it to be noticed from far away by people who otherwise might never have come across it. My mom is too frail to relocate now or to enjoy the many benefits of Bloomington. But in my father's memory, next month I'll be attending the Bernstein Mass at the Musical Arts Center. I want to thank everyone who's been so kind to my family and me during this difficult time. I am glad to be back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Volin. Councilmember Ruff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Chopra.
Yes, just briefly, I wanted to mention that I am eating a Jimmy John's sandwich and some Diet Coke up here today. I did order it at 5:55 so that I could eat it in the back room prior to the meeting, but you all saw me step out for a moment, and you probably figured out that Jimmy John's was not Freaky Fast today. And I just want to let you know that I tried not to be eating up here. I really did. I'm looking forward to a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
First of all, kudos to my colleague, Councilmember Volin, for speaking about his parents. I lost my parents a few years ago, and I don't think I could have spoken that eloquently without bawling so soon after. So thank you for sharing that with us. That was a very meaningful story. I wanted to just let people know that we had a very successful Women's History Month luncheon today. I'm sure a lot of people were there themselves. It was a full room at the Convention Center, Great Hall, as it usually is. And the keynote speaker was just fantastic and just, made everybody feel like they had accomplished nothing because she has accomplished so much. Her name was Joyce Ajloni, and she's General Secretary of the American Friends Service Committee, which I didn't really know a lot about, and she told us a little bit about it. It's, of course, a Quaker group, but it works throughout the world to bring peace and justice to communities, and most importantly, it doesn't impose leadership from outside on communities, for example, in the Middle East, in Africa, in other parts of the world. It hires people from those communities who can best understand the problems that are going on there and best work with the local society to address those problems. So I was very impressed by that. And then, of course, the Woman of the Year is Mary Getzy this year, who's my old University Children's Choir director. Fabulous woman. Even before her retirement, she would have earned this award in my book. But since she retired about 10 years ago, she has done amazing work with members of our community who are in jail and their families, and especially a reading program where people who are in jail can read and record themselves reading children's books, and those recordings can then be sent home to the children to listen to. Also a support system for families that are taking care of the children of people who are in jail. And it's just really important work because that's part of our community that's often marginalized and kind of blamed for their own problems, whereas, you know, it's often circumstantial. So, and then finally, the volunteers of the Community Justice and Mediation Center won the Toby Strout Lifetime Contribution Award. This was kind of a collective award this year. There are dozens of volunteer women who work for CJAM to help people throughout Bloomington and Monroe County resolve problems peacefully through discussions, through just bringing them to the table and finding common ground, and that's very admirable work. So I want to thank everybody who was involved with the luncheon. The Commission on the Status of Women is the main commission that works on it, and all the sponsors, because it was a great event today. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. I have an announcement and then a brief report. My announcement is that this Sunday, which is March 24th at 4 p.m., Anthony Weir of the Friends Committee on National Legislation will be here from Washington, D.C., speaking at the UU Church. And the title of the talk is The Myth of Usable Nuclear Weapons. This is a very important talk organized by Bloomington Peace Action Coalition. And it comes in an opportune time because the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists just made an announcement a few weeks ago declaring that we're at the closest point of nuclear Armageddon since the Cold War, since the worst points of the Cold War. We're at 2 minutes to midnight, and virtually no one knows about that. So this is a good chance to be educated about it and hopefully get citizens activated to tell our representatives to pull us away from the brink. So my report is about, it pertains to a letter that we wrote, that council sent to the Brownstone District Ranger at the Hoosier National Forest, Michelle Paduani, back in December. And it concerned a proposed clear cut in the Lake Monroe watershed. And the letter asks for an extension for comments, because they allowed only 30 days. And many of the announcements, apparently, that were sent out by email were sent into junk mail, essentially. And we also requested a meeting with the officials of the Hoosier National Forest, because we have, obviously, an interest in the Lake Monroe water quality. So we received a letter back recently, and they declined to extend the comment period, and I won't read the letter, but they maintained that there had been sufficient time for public comment, and they also declined to meet with us, at least for now. So it turns out, a friend told me this, that this Friday is UN World Water Day, which is a day to advocate for sustainable freshwater resources around the world, because it's something that we're running short on. And Lake Monroe is our only water source. It's our only water supply. It's compromised already because it has toxic algal blooms. We spend a tremendous amount of resources and money to purify the water. What we need to do is concentrate on the watershed to make sure that that lake is clean for recreation, for drinking water, for fishing, and so forth, recreation. So I think, and it also comes, as it turns out, I don't know if council is aware of this, but last week in Brown County, there was a huge error that was committed near Yellowwood, which was a logging effort that logged at least 8 acres, but maybe 20, when only an acre was meant to be logged by the Brown County Parks and Recreation Department. So they hired a logging firm to come in, and it was a scenic overlook, which isn't so scenic anymore, on State Road 135. So mistakes can be made. This has a huge consequence in Brown County. People are angry. And so my point is that it really is important for us to meet with state and federal officials, to open up lines of communication, have good communication about what's happening within our watershed. And it's imperative that we reset this relationship and go forward, hopefully with a memorandum of understanding about how our watershed is utilized and being forest. And so we did, at the conclusion of the letter from Michael Chavez, who's the forest supervisor for the Hoosier National Forest, he did end the letter by saying, I thank you for your interest in the Hoosier National Forest and look forward to further dialogue in the future on this and other topics of interest on your public lands. So I take that as an invitation that we can continue, and so let's do so. All right, with that, concluding council member comment, we'll go to mayor and city offices. Ms. Porter? Oh, did we miss public? I'm sorry. No, that's correct order. I'm sorry, we have to wait for public. So we'll go to mayor and city offices. Thank you. Ms. Porter?
Good evening. I'm Terry Porter, Director of Planning and Transportation for the city. And tonight we have a progress report for you on our Unified Development Ordinance. On our Unified Development Ordinance Update Project. Hello? Test, test.
Yours is on now, but ours aren't.
So,
There we go. Thank you.
good? Well, Planning and Transportation has been spearheading the project with the assistance of Clarion and Associates, who are here this evening to speak with you. As you know, we began our efforts to update the UDO in February 2018, shortly after the adoption of the new comprehensive plan. That plan had not been updated since 2002, and the accompanying Unified Development Ordinance regulations had not had a complete review and update since 2007. It's my understanding that it's considered a best practice for a community to update their ordinances soon after they adopt a new comprehensive plan, but that many communities are too worn out after the comp plan update process to immediately tackle updating their codes. However, we felt that it was very important for our ordinances to align with the new comprehensive plan, which serves as the guidebook and sets the direction for our built environment into the future. The comp plan challenges us to address and meet some major goals for Bloomington, particularly as they relate to affordable housing, sustainability, climate change, the protection of neighborhood character, and that's just to name a few. Since we began the UDO update process more than a year ago, we have held more than 60 stakeholder and public meetings, and more than 400 comments on the draft have been received and published online. We will continue to encourage citizen input through the end of April, when we hope to then prepare the document into a final draft to send before the Plan Commission and then on to you, the council. That being said, we understand that the UDO will not be perfect right out of the box. We see the UDO as a document in a 3-ring binder that can be adjusted as necessary. It's intended to be a living document that will be assessed and revisited. This is the 6th visit to Bloomington by Don Elliott, principal from Clarion, and his associate, Jim Spung, and I'll ask them now to come forward and give you an update on where we are in the process, what we can expect for next steps moving forward, and to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Don Elliott, principal with Clarion Associates. We're a national land use consulting firm that does this type of work. We work with communities all over the United States when they decide that their new plan deserves an update to the regulations and incentives that make it happen or don't make it happen. And so that's what I do for a living, and we're very grateful to have been chosen for this work. This is my mother's hometown, and she is very proud that I get to work in her hometown. So that's pretty good, again, for a woman of 88. I would like to give you a very brief update of where we are. Several of you, many of you have been in meetings that we have held, and you know some of these issues. But I have about 10 slides. I want to go quickly to hit the highlights and then tell you what we've been hearing so that you are briefed before the phone starts ringing, or maybe it's already started ringing. But we'll try to keep it very short to give you plenty of time to ask questions about what this is, why this is proposed the way it is. I would only reiterate, this is a draft. We are paid, my firm is paid to work with stakeholders and citizens and you and the Planning Commission over a period of time to get to the start of the democratic process, to get something good enough to say this is worth the time of the Planning Commission. It's now been refined to the point where the public can comment on this intelligently because this looks to be a balancing of different interests. And that's what the UDO is. The comp plan is a balancing of competing good ideas, and you try to figure out how to make many of them happen. They can't all happen in the same place at the same time. So a lot of what the comp plan does is balancing competing good values. And that's what the UDO does too. What part of them and how do you balance these tensions between what very well-meaning business owners and citizens and stakeholders and nonprofits and service agencies want to have happen? So let's go quickly. Why are we doing it? The main reason is implement the comp plan. The themes that have come up over and over again is we need more affordable housing, we need more sustainable development, we need to get a handle on the student housing pressures on Bloomington's affordable housing stock. We need to resolve that tension in a way that is better than what you have today. It should be more user-friendly, and it should allow developers and builders to have a more predictable process. I have yet to have any client say, please make my approval process more unpredictable and longer. I just don't. That doesn't happen. So how do you do this efficiently? We are here. We did some initial orientation and assessment of what needed to be fixed. We prepared the draft in 3 parts, and those were 3 of our visits. Let's talk about potential districts. You can't see it under my arrow. Then development standards, then the process. Then put it all together, try to respond to as many comments as possible. There are 1,515 footnotes in this document right now to show who commented and what we changed and why we changed it. Those will come out at the end, but that's where we are, step 4. We are listening comments for the next 6 weeks till April 30th. Then we put an adoption draft. That does not mean it's done. As I said earlier, that means it is ready to have public testimony as to what we got right and what we got wrong. And you'll see that there are several documents that go along with that. So, what are the key changes? A few of these. We've reorganized all of the content into 7 chapters. The districts are laid out in a 2-page spread, which you see on the right, a conceptual drawing, a purpose statement, dimensionals, main things about how tall can the building be, how big can it be, how far back from the property lines does it have to be. We have suggested 4 new zone districts that you don't have now that would help create or induce the types of development that your comp plan says you want. In many cases, we have reduced the minimum lot sizes necessary for new development. That has to do with sustainable, walkable, more efficient development patterns. Your minimum lot sizes in some cases are a half an acre just to get going in the mixed use or the multifamily zones. That's really high for a city of this size. So we have reduced it to try to open up new opportunities for more efficient development. We have taken out, in many cases, the dwelling unit per acre limits, which act as an artificial cap on the housing that can go in a building that you said was not too big. So if the zone ordinance says 3-story building is okay here as long as you keep X% of the site undeveloped and you have Y landscaping and Z parking, you have numbers in there that keep the number of units in that building very artificially low. And when that happens, they have to make up that fewer units by charging more for each unit in order to develop. So that is being removed and say, let's focus on the size and the scale of the buildings. We have a lot of tools to do that. And then you spend a lot of time on PUDs, and we are trying to narrow that by providing more districts and standards that can allow more development to go through without a negotiated PUD. Second slide on this is simply urban agriculture. Came up several times. Your local food producers and advocates have been very effective in saying we want to have the ability to do community gardens, locally grown food in many zone districts. And by the way, we'd also like to be able to sell those vegetables from those sites. We have made that readily available. You'll remember that 16 months ago, you imposed an interim ordinance which cut the heights of buildings downtown, and we said we would reconsider that in this process. In this draft, the student housing, I'll talk about that in a minute, student housing remains a story below where it was a year and a half ago. The rest of them do not. We can talk about that. There is a new minor site plan process that says, for the sake of efficiency and predictability, some development proposals are big enough they go to a hearing before planning and zoning. We're talking about site plans, not rezonings. Rezonings you will always see, but site plans, does it comply with the ordinance? The prevailing practice around the country, increasing practice, is to say big ones that require judgment go to the planning commission. Smaller ones where the only question is, do they comply with the code, go through an administrative site plan. And we have set that system up, a minor site plan process. Finally, there's a minor modification process that allows staff to vary different standards, a setback or an open space standard, several others, by 5 or 10%, sometimes 15%, because that site is unusual, and what you're trying to do is right for the area. It is in the same scale. It's the use. It should be allowed. It's intended to be allowed, but there's something about the shape or the terrain or the constraints or the easements on your lot, which mean that it misses by some of the. We've listed all the different things. There are several of them that staff could approve with 5 or 10% without going. Some of them, if it's a really small lot, 25% might be a foot. Literally, 25% adjustment might be a foot, so there are things like that, so those are allowed to be done without sending people through a variance. Variance is a hardship standard. Yes, you could make them do that. Most cities around the country say, listen, if it's in this realm, we have decided this is enough judgment that we can give because it is not created by the property owner's actions, and it is also created by the site. They have a site that has got an unusual situation which needs to be adjusted. We would prefer not to send them to a quasi-legislative hearing for one parking space or for a foot of setback. So that's in there too. Student housing has gotten a lot of attention. This has been perhaps the word most often spoken, although it may be in a tie with affordable housing. The draft says the way to separate and get at both the student housing problem and the affordable housing is to treat them differently, clearly define them. So we've had several stakeholder meetings on this issue. Basically, the draft says if you are building anything with 4 or 5 bedrooms, or a building with more than a third of the units with 3 or more bedrooms, you are student housing. It is extremely likely that is being built for rental to students, and it is likely to be occupied by students. There are not a lot of families who occupy 5-bedroom apartments. And so it draws a line, and the reason it draws a line, and other types, 1s, 2s, 3s, up to a third 3s, are treated as just multifamily housing. Student housing is regulated more strictly. Multifamily housing that is different than that is regulated more leniently to induce people to build more workforce-type housing, the type of housing that is not being explicitly designed for students. So you can see the definition. If you are a student housing project, you have lower height limits than other multifamily. You have maximum floor plate, meaning how big can the footprint be? In different zone districts. Obviously, the smaller districts have narrower footprints. They need to be 300 feet from each other, and there's sometimes need conditional use approval. It's a system that says we are going to define student housing and regulate it much more significantly than we are multifamily. Now, the exception is this. We are proposing a new mixed-use student housing zoning, and in that district, you would be able to go higher. You would not be subject to the maximum floor plates. You would not be subject to the spacing. And we have talked with staff about the fact that we don't think it's a pipe dream. There are logical places in Bloomington where that could happen. One of the issues we have struggled with mightily is that if you're not careful, the student housing demand forces its way into single-family neighborhoods. We haven't had any fans for that so far. So where is it gonna go? We have been reminded it was supposed to go downtown. Well, it's gone downtown, and now there's a feeling that we don't want all of it downtown, which leads to the question, then where will it go? And we do believe this will help, and I can answer questions about it, but the short answer is student housing separated by multifamily, student housing regulated strictly, except in one zone where it would be allowed to be bigger and be near the campus and be near the stadium, basically. That's not a decision, but when the comp plan says key corridors, stadium, the comp plan gives you guidance on where Bloomington says it would like more student housing to go, and this is designed to be imposed there wherever you, as the policymakers, decide it should be in the future. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Affordable housing, the next thing is That definition, we found a lot of things in the UDO that appeared to be trying to discourage student housing that had an unintended impact of discouraging all multifamily housing. That doesn't help. Whether you want to live in a single-family house or not, some people have to live in multifamily, and the point was, by discouraging some of the efforts that were to discourage student housing, we think had the effect of also discouraging the types of workforce housing that you need to have. So the new definition helps. There's a new R4 district proposed that would allow smaller single-family detached lot sizes than you currently allow. It's a 4,200 square foot minimum. We've had many discussions about how many communities that are under affordable housing pressure and want to open up new opportunities for single-family detached housing are allowing smaller lots than that. And that number may go down. It's not proposed to be mapped when the UDO is adopted, but we are having discussions. Is 4,200 small enough to actually induce people to build single-family homes that might be more affordable? There are minimum lot sizes I talked about earlier for multifamily that will make it easier to build that. We have removed these dwelling unit per acre limits. I got ahead of myself there. Now, I have two at the bottom that are asterisks because I'm going to come back to them. In addition to trying to separate the multifamily student housing from multifamily workforce housing, which is never perfect, because no one can prevent a student from renting an apartment, but you can discourage the things that are aimed deliberately at them. We have said part of the issue is allowing a wider diversity of housing in the lower density neighborhoods. The draft says duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes would be allowed in corner lots in these districts. I put an asterisk because I want to come back and talk about it more. And I'm sorry for the fonts because it's gotten over my last point. But the last point also has a red asterisk. Accessory dwelling units are proposed to be allowed without conditional use approval, and we're proposing to remove the 300-foot spacing. We have been criticized for this on the basis that council already wrestled this alligator to the ground and we decided what we wanted to do. Why are you doing this again? And the answer was, we were told, you write a lot of codes around the country. If you think we should be doing something different, advise it. And if council wants to stick with what they did, they'll stick with what they do. But we are finding that more and more places that were very strict on accessory dwelling units initially are loosening up on it because they're just not seeing the issues arise that they thought were going to arise. That has a red asterisk. I want to talk to you more about that in about 2 slides. So, neighborhood transitions is another key thing that we have put in here. Basically, no matter how high you can build a building in different districts, if you are within 50 feet of a low-density residential district, your maximum height is the same maximum height as that residential district. Your setback from that property line is also the same as it would be on the residential side of the property. If they have to be X feet from the property line, you need to be X. Oh, but I don't need to. I'm in a commercial district. No, you're still going to be further back to give them some breathing room. In the next 50 feet, you can go 1 story higher, and after that, you can go to whatever the maximum height of that district is. This has been warmly received by the neighborhoods, as you might imagine. It is something that is included in most new ordinances, just to say there are lots of times when the places that need to grow or want to grow per your comp plan are adjacent to lower density single-family neighborhoods, and this gives them some confidence that the city can approve larger and different uses without having that fear that they're going to be right next to their single-family home, or if they are, they're going to be shorter and smaller and further away. Affordable housing, the last 2 I want to talk about, I think, are the incentives. We have been asked to rethink the incentives, which are very, they're, I would say, working only awkwardly now because they take a lot of negotiation and horse trading to get them. Our experience firmly around the country is if you want builders to take the bait and do what you want them to do, you make it easy to do that. You make it objective. I have done X, I get Y. And that removes a lot of time from the process and uncertainty from the process. We actually find that negotiated systems are tougher because the builders come in asking far more because they know they're going to get whittled down in the process. And they actually would prefer something that says, in return for X, I get Y. The draft says, if you restrict at least 20% of your multifamily units to less than 120% of the average area median income, you can earn 1 floor of additional space. If you do 10% of it below 80%, which is a tough cross-subsidy, it's hard to build housing for 80% AMI. And the other 10%, so you're still doing 20, but some of it is a deep subsidy, some of it's a moderate subsidy, you can gain 2 additional floors. And it's not available for student housing. Now, we have had a lot of talk, and I think that I'm not speaking out of turn to say the mayor would like to figure out a way to incent student housing to help solve the affordable housing problem that way, too, and so we're still considering it. It is not available in the areas I just showed you. Oh, I get 2 more floors. Not if you're in that 100 feet, you don't, because you're going to have to step it down. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card with regard to the adjacent neighborhoods. And finally, if you have less than 50 units in this project and you're setting 20% on the side, you are going to do administrative review, not a hearing. At an earlier draft, we had a higher number than that. People said it's too high. We cut it down. This has to do with minor and major things. If you looked at I could tell you that, in general, if you have more than 30 dwelling units, you go to a hearing. If it's affordable housing deed restricted, this proposes that you can get up to 50 and you don't go to a hearing. You're still going to meet parking, landscaping, lighting, everything that you have to do at the building, but it ups the amount of units you can put in without going through a hearing. I know that Bloomington and many towns are very used to having hearings on many, many things. I will tell you that the numbers we have talked about are important. Parking, height, setback, open space, things like that are very important to housing economics. When I talk to affordable housing builders and I say, what is the one thing you could give me? First of all, I say, what is a good incentive? They say, well, you guys always give 5 or 10% incentives. I can't do it. That's not enough incentive for me to do affordable housing. It's got to be big. That's why we have a 1- and 2-story imposed. It has to be big to get their attention. But before that, they will say, the number one thing you can do for me is to not make me go through a hearing every time. That is the number one thing you can do to promote affordable housing, is not make it a public negotiation. To be very honest, very candid, because you'll get some people who oppose this just because they don't want affordable housing. It pours gas on a difficult discussion. And so I'm honest. So that's where we're doing on affordable housing. In sustainable development, we've been asked, and again, we've tried to make it more objective. There are 2 ways to earn it. There are 7 specific sustainability things you can do on your property. If you choose 5 of them, you get an additional floor of development. Or, if you choose, you can go through a LEED or a Green Building Challenge or a Livable Building Challenge, we name them in there, or a comparable rating system by a third party. And if they certify you as hitting different levels, you get an extra floor. You can't do 2 floors. You do A or B. And this is deliberate to try to provide more opportunity for people to earn building height through affordable housing than through sustainability. Sustainability is very important, but one of the reasons we didn't put more here is that we have tried to build a lot of that stuff into the UDO baseline. And frankly, Bloomington already does in its current UDO, and more so in the new UDO, many of the sustainability things that other cities offer a reward for. So it's hard to say we're going to reward you with more space when in fact you are requiring it and you have taken those actions already. So that's the second opportunity. What if I do both? What if I do a sustainable building and affordable housing? And the answer is, if you're piling them up, you can do another floor, but it can only be half as big as the floor below. I don't have a picture of this, but so the answer is, gee, this sounds like a lot of play. How much more could I do? Answer is, if you do affordable housing, you could get 1. If you do deep affordable, 2. If you do all of them together, you get 2.5. I will say that I hope that happens, but deep affordable cross subsidies are difficult to do. So I don't think it's going to happen very often. So that's sustainable. Last thing, I want to point this out. We have a binder here, and it is a draft. I will repeat what Terry said. It's a draft that we are bringing forward and explaining because we want people to tell us what's wrong. And I'm about to show you a slide where they've told us, you got that wrong. And we want to draw you into the tensions that are behind those things. So we'll do it. But I want to tell you that out of these 300 pages, the discussion has focused on about 5 to 10 pages. So there is a lot of this that is not being questioned as either. Nobody has said it's less user-friendly. Nobody has said, I don't think it's sustainable enough. I will now tell you the 4 topics where we'd love to just get your thoughts in addition to whatever else you want to tell us. And here's what people are talking about during our visits. Student housing, dormitory, and size replacement. The definition and the tools I gave to you in a prior slide what we've done. To be honest, I think the reaction from the neighborhoods has been pretty good. They have not complained about it. The builders think they're strict. They think that they are pretty strict and that they particularly don't like the spacing requirements. But I don't want to speak for them. They haven't had a long time to look at it, neither have the neighbors, and that's why there's another 6 weeks to look at it. But there are pushback on that. We've had, I guess you don't want any more student housing. And the answer was, well, you can do a lot of housing and rent it to students. We are being strict on 4 to 5 bedrooms, and the question is, have we been too strict on 4 to 5 bedrooms? I explained the second one, this student housing zone district where you can do bigger ones and not spread them out and have taller heights and not be subject to the floor plate. There is skepticism that the city will map that, to be honest. There's skepticism that it looks great, thank you. Matter of fact, no one has objected to the new zone district. The logic behind, if you're going to tell us where it doesn't exist, then where you don't want it, then tell us where you do want it. There is skepticism that it will be a nice chapter written in here, but it will never hit the zoning map of Bloomington. There is skepticism over that, and the idea is, if you shut down here and you don't open up there, I have a hard time getting where you're going with this. Third, this issue, and these are the 2 asterisks I gave you, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on corner lots in the core neighborhoods has gotten a lot of pushback from the neighbors. We don't have to do this. We could whittle it back. We could whittle the number of bedrooms. We could whittle the number of units. Here's the issue. The issue is that if you kind of say single-family zone districts should only ever have single-family homes, that is between 50 and 70% of the land in every community, in this community. And it is a large part of the housing that's going to be there 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Most communities that have this discussion say, we need to find ways to leaven the edges or the middle of that with more opportunities to house more people. Now that's gotten, to be around, a very weak reception in Bloomington. But, and this is still under discussion, what part of this would work or what part is not. So there's a tension. Single family should just be single family. And there's a very serious argument that's been made, which is, even though you mean well, and it might not be the worst thing in the world to have a duplex or a triplex on the corner of my neighborhood. I mean, I can point to many neighborhoods around America who have always had them, and others who have them now and think it's fine. They do not feel ruined by this at all. That's not the issue. The issue is, do you then feed the land value? Does everybody with a corner lot then think, whoa, I shouldn't even consider selling this to somebody for a house? I got a fourplex, a potential fourplex here. Now I'm talking big dollars. And what does that unintentionally do to the affordability and the erosion? And that is a strong argument because your student housing market is so strong, the pressures to maximize property value are so strong that, frankly, we are still thinking about whether that is the right thing to do or what version of it would be acceptable. And we just want you to know about that. I'm being very candid. It's gotten a very unfriendly reception from most of the neighborhoods so far. Finally, and some of them have said, actually, I would think you could allow them in some other way, but not on the corners. I don't even think the corners are a good idea. So, finally, accessory dwelling units. As I've said before, there are worries about that. The real worry is that there'll be too many of them in a neighborhood. We have said. I can't tell you cities that are repealing their accessory dwelling unit requirements. Most of them are trying to allow more of them because it is not a bad way. It's good not only for people like me who have a son who finished college but he hasn't got a job yet and he's living with me or mother-in-law, but we're also finding it used by people who live in moderate and low-income areas who think if they could create a rental unit, student or non-student, and it would help them pay the mortgage and keep in there, or young families that can't afford the house without an ADU, but with the ADU, they could afford the house because of the rental unit allows them to buy it. So once again, you ask us to tell us your opinion. Those are our opinions. We do know that you've already decided it and you may not want to revisit that. I have only one slide here. Next steps. This is a draft. I think we've said it several times. We welcome your comments. We've been out here 6 times. We'll be out here again, and as long as you want to have us come. But we have posted this on the web. We have said it's available for comment till April 30th. The conversion map will be posted soon. The conversion map says if you are called X before, you're going to be called Y after. And that is not going to change lot lines or zoning lines. It is going, zoning district boundaries. It's a 1-to-1 conversion. It will not have the new zoning districts on it. We have recommended that to you because if we have a conversion map, it'll be posted, and people will be able to look, okay, they call me R3, where is R3? I see, oh, it's actually the same thing as what I got now, same boundaries as where I have now. But it'll help people understand. We recommend that you do that because that keeps the public thinking about, is this the right rule book? Are these the right setbacks? Are they right heights? Are they right incentives? Do we have the toolkit we need? Because the moment we try to roll in boundary changes on a zoning map into this discussion, nobody looks at the book. They're all focused on the map, and the discussion of are these the right rules gets all tangled up with, do I want to move that zoning district line? And so we recommend you do it in 2 stages. We're going to post that. We're going to then revise it to have an adoption draft, and that one, and make further changes, and that one will be ready for Planning Commission. We do recommend, I think most of you know by now, that the city, when this comes into effect, then go through a second remapping to apply the new zone districts and to consider what other changes are needed in order to implement the comp plan. If you want to do them together, you can, but it usually extends the process a long time because it's very hard to have a debate about the map and the debate about the text at the same time. It gets very confusing, and so that's our recommendation. But in the next month, it'll be comments on this and the preparation of an adoption draft and the beginning of the process of officially considering it as a proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Are there questions from council? Let's try to keep them brief if we could. Councilmember Volin.
Thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. I'm glad to see the progress. Looking forward to seeing it after, in the summertime here. We heard in the debate over the PUD at Century Village on the far east side of town from neighborhoods who claimed that not only did they not want the student housing there, but that there would be no need for student housing, that IU is going to be leveling off. They tried to cite current enrollment data and projected enrollment data to say that in this coming decade, IU would effectively be flat. Do we even need to create a student housing area if that's true?
We've heard the same data. I will tell you, I've heard that data in Bloomington more than I've heard of it in the other towns that we've...
I don't believe it. I'm just saying that they reported it.
I think one of the things, my response is twofold. A, if that's true, then dividing out the 4 and 5 bedrooms and saying you can't do it shouldn't be a problem at all, because in fact there should be declining demand for all of that going down the road. I'm not sure I believe it. One of the trump cards that Bloomington and Columbia, Missouri, and State College, Pennsylvania, and Ball State, I grew up near Muncie, have is the university. It's an enormous economic engine, and it may be that the demographics are flattening out. I am not at all convinced that enrollment is going to fall as a result of that. I really have think about the global economy. Think about what education means to being a player in the global economy. The idea, it may be that there are fewer freshmen 10, 15 years from now. I doubt that there are going to be fewer students at the University of Indiana 10 years. It may be more graduate students. It may be other people who are doing things. Thank you.
Okay, the bigger question I have, and this is important to me, is that the whole argument, I'm not sure where the idea for a student housing zone came from, but I find it to be objectionable to the extreme. My residents, my constituents are students. How are they not equal citizens of Bloomington? Why do we segregate them? Why are we proposing that they be separated in a different place, effectively creating, co-creating a larger campus with Indiana University?
That's a very good question, and I think it has to do with names and perhaps my failure to explain it very well. The proposal is not to limit where students can have housing in any place. It may have been more accurate to, instead of calling it the student housing zone, call it the 4 and 5 bedroom and a lot of 3 bedroom zone. Because that's what it regulates, is the very multiple 4 and 5 things that are deliberately built for students. It opens up opportunities for multifamily housing in smaller areas, and student housing and those are allowed. Students can rent in any of those things.
Why should we allow any more 4 and 5 bedroom units if the only people who use them are students? Let them live in 3 bedroom or smaller. Why should we even allow it at all?
The pushback we've gotten is that despite the debate over it, there is still a market for it, and it is still more efficient to build 4 and 5 bedroom student housing than 3 and 2 and 1 houses. I understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Sorry.
Steve, on that.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your
questions?
status report. Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yeah, I was just looking at the corners, and if you did corners in my neighborhood, you would affect 33% of the housing stock. So you're going to take 33% of the housing stock and upzone it radically. That's a bad idea. It's going to make the costs for individual home buyers explode, and it's going to make the people that live next to those, which is everybody else in the neighborhood, because you got 2 houses an alley, 2 houses an alley. So everybody lives next to one of those. They're on the corners.
Are you counting corners with alleys?
No, I was just counting
I'm surprised at the number.
house, alley,
I'm
house,
surprised at the
house,
number.
alley.
You've been very eloquent throughout this process in stating the reasons why you think any form of duplex, triplex, and fourplex is a bad idea in those areas. I need to be honest, we have other people who have said in these hearings, I think it's a good idea, and that's why
I
we
hear
are
that.
bringing you guys into the discussion.
I was here when that zoning went in, and it was a commitment to the neighbors and the people who bought in the neighborhood. And they banked on it, they built on it, they invested on it, and changing it under their feet, I see as a betrayal to people who invested in a neighborhood that needed people to invest in, was all rental, by the way, and was deteriorating because of the rental properties. So to go negative and go backwards, I certainly don't want to see that.
Councilmember Folin, you have a brief question.
One other question. You mentioned briefly, I didn't see it afterwards, at the beginning you mentioned something about the reduction in the use of PUDs. Can you speak briefly about how will PUDs change under this new UDO?
Yes. PUDs, unfortunately, are used a lot in this city, and we think that's true for 2 reasons. A, you've gotten used to negotiating, and B, the ordinance doesn't make sense internally. There's an awful lot of it that if I was a builder, I'd look at those numbers and say, I can't make it work. I got to talk about a PUD. I can't make that lot size and that coverage work. It's not at all modern. I can't build things. So the bottom line is PUDs take a long time to negotiate, and they also, the hidden part of it, usually by the time you get done, people are happy and they say, good, we like that. They get out of date very quickly, or if they're not, they usually have to be amended repeatedly as the market changes. And therefore, the part that a lot of the public doesn't see, they're engaged in the first part. They don't see that after it's adopted, it takes an enormous amount of staff time to do it. And even though it's got the merit of flexibility, I can keep amending it, from the point of view of people who've already bought into it, it's lack of predictability. They told me it would be X, now they've amended it again. Now they've amended it again. Now they've amended it again. So essentially, all over the country, I've been told to stop saying that because Bloomington's unique, and you are. But the point is, I don't have any client saying, I would like to do more PUDs. All of them say, if we're going to rewrite the rule book, let's figure out which zone districts, which standards, which incentives are the way we want to do business, and limit the amount of time we have to spend to not only negotiate these things, but then administer them for a long, long time in the future, because they're very labor-intensive and inefficient.
Just the last follow-up. In other cities where the PUDs were in use, does this kind of work tend to reduce people's use of them?
Substantially, substantially. The other part I didn't mention is to make sure that what you're asking for and the price of admission to the negotiation game includes what you really want. So part of it is, if you want to come in and negotiate your own deal in Bloomington, maybe it clearly needs to say, we would like to see the following kinds of amenities, either greener buildings, greener development, or we would like to see some level of affordability. You can't use this to get out of the affordability game. We are going to list the things you need to do. You don't do those things, I don't want to be mean, but we're really not interested in engaging in a lengthy negotiation to get you out of the things that really matter to the city. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Without any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you very much, please. And thank you for the time. It's very helpful to us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I love this work, and this is a fun place to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will go to council committee reports. Are there any? Seeing none, we'll go to the public now. So we have 20 minutes, and we have one member of the public, 2? Okay, you'll have 5 minutes each. Thank you.
Okay, hold on to your seats. This is going to be a compliment, a heartfelt one, and an expression of appreciation of the extended family of Toby Strout to the City Council for proclaiming 2 weeks ago an encomium to Toby and the naming of South Washington Street between 2nd and 3rd Toby Strout Way. I'm Bob Arnold, for the record, the companion dance partner and husband of Toby for the 30-year period during which she was the executive director of Middleway House. I particularly want to thank, beginning with Andy Ruff, who, when I mentioned the street naming to him a couple of months ago, said he was going to take the initiative to proclaim an encomium. And then Dave Rollo joined with Andy in taking the steps to get the proclamation declared 2 weeks ago. I regret not being able to attend the meeting, but I heard the WFHB broadcast, and the people who talked, they've read the encomium. You spoke also, Dave. Andy spoke about Toby, and Susan spoke about Toby. And if I'm missing some name, I want to thank you as well. I also want to thank Dash over here, who did some fine editing of the material provided by Middleway House, and also made sure that the proclamation was in conformity with City Council guidelines. So, muchas gracias, un abrazo a todo. Many thanks and a big hug to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Aronoff. It was an honor to know Toby. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bingham. I'd like to make a somewhat belated response to the mayor's State of the City speech. Sorry for being so belated. I had somewhat of a family emergency that took me out of commission for several weeks. I very much appreciated that Mayor Hamilton made sustainability such a big piece of his speech, and that his words, at least, seem to recognize how important it is that we respond to climate change in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. However, I was deeply disappointed in the action he proposed following those words. A task force to study creating a natural gas digester from our waste falls far, far short of what we need to be doing. Waste, solid waste in particular, represents only about 3% of our emissions. I dug through and found our 2016 emissions inventory that we did so that we can work with more numbers that are more specific to us. I've been going through that and actually generating emissions targets for us based on the IPCC's cuts. And I would love to present those to council, preferably before the garage vote, because they are extremely relevant to the decision on the garage and to all following decisions. I've asked President Rollo for time to do that, and I don't know if I'll be granted it. If not, I'll do my best to do it through public comment. On the digester, natural gas is not so much more efficient in our bus fleet that we can really afford to be using it. Depending on the studies you look at, it's at best about 22% more efficient in greenhouse gases than diesel. Some studies actually find that it is less efficient than diesel, depending on the conditions and the engine. Newer diesel engines are a lot more efficient, and the gains you get from using natural gas over diesel get a lot smaller. It is a lot cleaner in particulate emissions. That's where its primary advantage over diesel is. Given that we need to cut emissions by 45% in 10 years and get to 0 in 30 years, we need to be looking at electric buses or hydrogen buses, not natural gas buses. If the digester takes materials, if we're going to be setting up compost collection infrastructure in order to collect food waste from the city to feed into this digester, if that takes compost that could have, or food that could have been composted and fully sequestered, feeds it into the digester to turn it into natural gas, which then gets combusted into an emitting fuel, there's actually a chance that this digester could increase our emissions. At best, it's going to be small cuts. If we're going to be creating a task force to look at climate, the task force shouldn't be at a specific idea that, seems shooting from the hip to be something that might work. It should be a comprehensive review of everything we're doing, all our emissions, and how we can make cuts to those to hit the IPCC's targets. That's what we need to be doing right now. I'm doing an individual who happens to have a physics degree is first pass at that. But we need, the expertise of the city government, people who have full-time jobs and the full access to the research and the resources of the city to be doing that research so that we can be making decisions on the basis of, here are our emissions, here are where we can make cuts, here are the things we can impact. Just from a high-level point of view, 56% of average American emissions, 28% is grid, 17% is individual cars and trucks, 11% is natural gas combustion for home heating. That's 56% we could impact through municipal policy. We need to be doing that. If the mayor doesn't do this, then the city council needs to step up to do it. I don't know what tools the city council has to direct the city government to do that research, but if we're making decisions without an awareness of where our emissions are, where we can cut them, thinking about how to cut them, and without an awareness of the goals we need to hit, then we're going to be making decisions that come back and bite us in the rear end, like potentially building a parking garage that, based on the idea that it will be filled with cars that will pay for the slots, that doesn't end up getting filled because people stop driving when gas goes up to $10 a gallon or $15 a gallon because it's getting carbon priced. We need to be thinking of everything we do, we need to be thinking of it through this lens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. And by the way, I replied to you to try to coordinate timing for you. Other comment from the public? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to appointments of boards and commissions. Are there any? Seeing none, we will go to legislation for second reading and resolutions.
Mr. Chair, I move that ordinance 1907 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance 1907 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Yes, ordinance 1907, amending Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding updating permissible towing and storage fees for authorized towing services. Bless you. The synopsis is as follows. Ordinance 1907 updates the maximum fees maximum authorized towing services may charge when performing city-initiated tows. At present, the city permits a maximum towing fee of $55 for daytime towing, $65 for nighttime towing, $25 for dollying, or $10 or $15 per day of storage, depending on whether or not the vehicle is wrecked, and a $15 per night retrieval charge. These maximum permissible fees have remained unchanged since 2001 and therefore have fallen out of line with the maximum permissible fees utilized by all other government agencies in Monroe County. Ordinance 1907 updates and simplifies permissible maximum towing fees by authorizing a $125 base towing fee regardless of the time the tow is initiated, maintaining the existing $25 dollying fee, and updating permissible storage fees to $25 per day regardless of whether or not the towed vehicle is wrecked. Your due pass recommendation was 700.
Thank you, clerk.
Mr. Chair, I move that ordinance 1907 be adopted.
Mr. Rooker?
Thank you, council members. Michael Rooker, City Attorney for the City of Bloomington. Ordinance 1907 proposes an update to the maximum permissible fees that may be charged when the city initiates a tow. Have I done this again?
Just close, just come closer.
Just come closer
Just come
then.
closer. No, it's on.
It's on.
Oh, thank you. I'll get this right eventually at some point. I've done this enough, I should know by now. But anyways, 1907 updates the maximum permissible towing fees that the city's authorized towing partners may charge for city-initiated tows. At present, the city partners with 4 companies to handle city-initiated tows from the right-of-way and from other city facilities. Those partners are Automobile Towing, Rick's Towing, Ken's West Side Towing, and Hawkins Towing. Representatives from the tow companies are with us here tonight if you have questions for them later on. I think it's important at the beginning here to distinguish between public tows and private tows. I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past. This maximum rate covers only public tows. So that means tows that are initiated by the city of Bloomington. Private tows, which are tows from private property, for example, from apartment complex lots or restaurant lots, those aren't covered by these caps. So this covers only public tows. But what this ordinance does do is it increases the maximum rates that may be charged by the city's towing partners. Last year, the city's towing partners reached out and pointed out to us that our fees appeared to be out of line with those fees that are permitted by other public agencies in Monroe County. As you can see from the chart on your screen, after we dug into it a little bit, we discovered that that was, in fact, the case. The base fee that is permitted for a public tow by Monroe County, by Indiana University, by the Indiana State Police, and by the town of Ellettsville is $125. The city of Bloomington's fees right now are capped at $55 for a daytime tow and $65 for a nighttime tow. Ordinance 1907 proposes an increase to bring it into line with the other public agencies to bring it to $125. Similarly, Ordinance 1907 proposes increasing the per-day storage fee to $25. As you can see, the current fees are $10 for operable vehicles and $15 for wrecked vehicles. Again, that's quite out of line with the other public agencies in Monroe County. Ordinance 1907 also eliminates the night retrieval charge to simplify the ordinance so that to simplify the fee structure so that it's a little bit more digestible for members of the public and easier for our towing partners to administer. It's important for the city to keep the maximum permissible rates that our partners may charge fair. We value the relationships that we have with our towing partners, and we also want to make sure that they can pay their employees a fair wage and that they can provide them with appropriate safety equipment and proper towing equipment. I don't want to minimize what Ordinance 1907 does. Any fee increase is a fee increase, but really in many ways this is just a housekeeping provision. It's important for the city to periodically examine all of the fees that exist in the city code, and this is just another one of those fees. This one had clearly grown stale, so we're asking the city council to update it tonight. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions, and so are folks from the towing companies.
Thank you, Mr. Rooker. Are there questions from council? Mr. Sims?
Thank you. And I want to thank you for the presentation and the comments that we got from some of our operators a couple weeks ago, I think. And it's true that us considering the cap fee will ensure that the safety has been met and maintained, and that we get fair wages for our operators. But my question is, with the cap, does that mean that the charge of the maximum charge of $125 will be charged every time, or is there a variation built in? Can there be a toll where it'll be $75, for an example? Or is that such a thing? I mean, I'm asking because I don't know, and I'm not advocating one way or the other at this point, but.
Legally, the ordinance only sets a cap.
Correct.
So,
That's what
certainly,
I'm saying.
you could ask members from the industry how frequently people don't charge at the cap, but legally, that's
One
all
of
it
them can
does.
respond if they want or when they come up here, but is it the 125 every time?
Again, my name's Ken Parrish with Ken's Westside Service and Towing here in Bloomington, representing the four companies here tonight, and here to answer any questions that you guys might have. Councilmember Sims, you asked about what other rates that would be.
Or could be, yeah.
Excuse me. What they're asking about the maximum tow rate, there is a little hidden stuff in there that may not, and I'm here to be honest with you and tell you exactly what it is. The tow fee itself is for us to attach to the vehicle and tow it back to our yard from the scene. There are specialty equipment, a lot of times that's needed and used on scene at times, that need to be added to that. A lot of times would be maybe some winching fees to recover a vehicle out of a ditch or to recover it back onto its wheels. So you'll have some winching or labor time to make that happen. Those usually range anywhere from $25 to $125 on their own. And then when I say that, in certain areas in Bloomington, the city kind of goes on the outskirts. There's some deep ravines, culverts, ditches, so on and so forth. It takes a little bit of labor on our end to get those out of those ditches and ravines to be able to tow. The rates we're talking about tonight is just simply the hook and tow away. Another additional fee that may be tacked on top of that would be dollies, and if you guys aren't familiar with that, dollies is another tool that we have on our trucks that I'd probably say 75% of vehicles that we tow in today's industry are all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. You can't just hook one side of it and tow it into town because it'll do damage to, all kinds of driveline issues with it because they have to be off the ground. We can't always send a flatbed truck, as you guys have seen, the roll-off truck, rollback trucks, whatever, where you just roll it up and then all four tires are sustained off the ground and gone. A lot of times it's because the recovery efforts on those certain trucks are limited. We can't reach certain vehicles. The wire rope is shorter. It has less pulling power to do certain towing and recovery efforts. So we have to also have a tow truck versus a rollback. Okay, so on a tow truck, we have a tool called dollies that we build on it, we mount it underneath the back wheel or whichever end. We hook this end, we have to apply the dollies to the other end to pick the vehicle up about 3 inches off the ground so they don't roll, and they actually roll on a set of tires that we mount underneath it. I'm pretty confident that all four of our companies, we charge about $25 to allow for that labor, and it takes about 30, let me just say different people as far as experience can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes to hook up the dollies. Also depends on how much damage there is to the vehicle, whether the tires are flat, bent, busted, broke. Sometimes it takes a little more effort to make that happen. Also another charge is what we call skates. To educate you that a little bit, on a flatbed vehicle, wrecker that we pull, again, during accidents of this sort, we have very helpful firemen, police departments, so on and so forth, okay? Unbeknownst to them at times, someone will get in an accident. They will help get this individual into an ambulance, send them on their way. They will try to get some personal items for these people, their purse, their wallet, their keys to the car. When they take those keys to the car, I can no longer, and neither can any of us, get this vehicle into neutral to roll it up onto the bed. Okay? So it's locked into gear. Again, it's not our job to determine how crashed, how damaged, whether this vehicle's totaled. That's not our job. Our job is to tow it back to our facility in the same condition in which we received it, not to create more damage to it, which will ensure more damage or cost to the person. So we have what they call skates, and they're basically really strong and slick slide pads that we take a sledgehammer and drive underneath the tires to allow the vehicle to slide across the asphalt and up onto our bed without doing damage to the drive lines of these vehicles or tear up tires or tear up anything else, okay? So we charge an extra additional $25. We try to keep it even with the dollies, no different than that. They're used to slide the vehicle onto the bed. They're also used to slide the vehicle off of our bed so we can unload it once we get back to our storage facility. Trying to think any other additional fees that may be there. Am I missing anything, gentlemen? Pardon? Oil, dry, and cleanup. We do charge for cleanup generally. Most accidents, we have to put the road back in the same condition it was before the accident. Again, we've got debris, car pieces, all kinds of oil, coolant, so on and so forth. Generally and typically, a nice rounded number, again, is 25. We try to keep this number consistent for everything. For one, we're trying to relay this to the police department as well. They're trying to keep record of all of this. If it's not a major accident, we've got minor cleanup. We try to keep it around $25 at minimum. Again, this is another fee that may or may not be on the list. But as respect to all of you and the public, we try to keep a minimal fee to it. You're probably not going to see a $250 cleanup bill on a simple accident for the simple fact that those are major catastrophic accidents. We're going to bring in crews. We don't normally have an oil spill down the highway because of two small cars. That's going to consist of, 5 guys and 800 bags of oil dry and cleanup crew and hazmat and all that stuff. We're addressing small and minor incidents. We're also addressing tow-ins as far as, I don't know how else to explain it, but DUIs, proof and proper of insurance. This is the kind of things that Bloomington Police Department is trying to keep our rates capped and at a certain rate. I know also that if the Bloomington Police Department doesn't send an actual tow-in sheet for this, if it's not justified by them to tow it in on their own, our rates technically are not regulated. If it's just a fender bender accident, technically these rates don't apply to what the city government allows. They just simply call the companies on call like ourselves that are also going to have a conscience and not try to take care of these people or take advantage of these certain people. That being said, that's why I am extremely happy that we have 4 towing companies that's on this rotation for Bloomington Police Department currently that are able to get along. We have conversations together. We talk about our rates. We try to keep everything the same. That way, whatever I do concerning the Bloomington Police Department, they do as well. These are conversations that, believe it or not, happen quite often, for the simple fact that we appreciate the fact that the time that you guys will take to us to listen to what we want to get our rates to back to where we can actually make a living. We can also pay a rate to an employee that's worth being out there and justify their time and their effort. At that time, we don't want to be accused of taking advantage of the public as well. So we kind of have a little bit of integrity in which we want to keep with you people as well. With that being said, is there any questions that you guys may have?
Thank you for that information. I think we have another question. Mr. Sims, or Councilmember Sims, were you?
Thank you.
Did that answer your?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Ruff is next, and then we'll go to Volin and then Sturbaum.
Yeah, this question is really, I think, for Mr. Rooker. Mr. Rooker, we've met last year, I think, and began talking about some of the issues related to private towing that have come up, and some people refer to some of the incidents involved as predatory towing. We talked about the issues that we might want to address eventually as a city, things like private towers not taking credit cards, only taking cash, making it difficult to retrieve vehicles because they're not having hours of access. Those kinds of issues we discussed. Is there any kind of overlap at all between those issues we were discussing about working towards a city ordinance, maybe modeling it on Indianapolis, what they did recently, and this towing, this city-initiated towing?
I think the short answer to that question is no. I think you're right. There are some cities around Indiana that regulate, they have what we call predatory towing ordinances, Columbus, Indianapolis being a couple of prominent examples. Bloomington does not at this time. But, I hate to be totally blunt in front of all these folks, but the remedy for the city when we run into our towing contractors who aren't handling their obligations appropriately, or we're getting reports from the public that they're doing inappropriate things, our remedy is to sever ties with those companies, to say you're no longer on the towing rotation, we're canceling our contract, and you're not going to be one of our towing partners anymore. Unfortunately, we have had to do that a couple of times, but that's the solution we use when we have our towing partners who aren't living up to their end of the obligations that are imposed in our contracts and by the city council.
And so thank you for that response. So I really felt like they were separate, and that's one reason I didn't yet pursue this further. I thought we should clean up our city side of things before we move on and deal with anything we might do on the private towing side. But my question related but different is, so the payment, is the city ever involved in any of the payments, the costs that are associated with one of these city-initiated tows? For example, the gentleman from Ken's mentioned the cleanup, right? Well, when that is billed, what if what if a person's position is, I shouldn't have been charged for that, that little bit of cleanup from a minor accident or something? Where's that tacked on? Is the city ever involved in the actual exchange or transaction at all?
Yeah, and you can comment on it as well. The general answer is that we are not. We do sometimes get contacted by members of the public who have want to mention a particular situation that they've had, and in those situations, lots of times we'll review it with the police department and with the towing company that was involved to make sure that everything was done appropriately. But generally speaking, the answer is no. So.
As far as the cleanup and some of these extra fees and charges, please understand, there are a lot of folks that we deal with who this vehicle is their only mode of transportation. They have no other. They also have very low income, okay? They do not have insurance, unfortunately. They don't have the means to contact anyone. These maximum rates are set simply to keep us who are honest more honest, so we don't try to gouge them. So also that we don't do the predatory towing and some of the issues and problems that I know every one of you have heard and talked and dealt about with the private towing and the predatory towing. The four of us that's on your list do not do that type of towing. There's a lot of reasons why. I'd rather not get into it at this time, but we don't, okay? We have the choice as business owners to charge less if we choose to. If someone comes into us and says, listen, that's my only car, I know it's cleanup fee and the tow fee and this and that, I promise you, for me to try to take the title to that car, dispose of that car, it actually costs me more money. To try to dispose of that car and take that car from this individual costs me money. I would rather take a lower payment or whatever form I can get from them and allow them to have their car back, as to me have to go through the paperwork to try to dispose of said vehicle. Because most of the time, and I mean this in no disrespect to any people, they don't even have the title of the car. They don't have the means to it. They don't know where it's at. It was gifted to them. Their mom bought it. Their dad bought it. They can't come up with it, and plainly, they're not going to. And they're going to be very belligerent and angry with me because I towed it in and because I have this astronomical fee, which in fact is just enough for us to just try to get by. We've already talked about the reasons why we want the rates changed. It is our choice at that time, depending on the situation, whether or not we allow them to have that at a cheaper rate. I know standing here in front of you, and I know every one of these guys here has also been on an accident scene to where I have someone coming up to me, a young mother, single mother, or a single individual doing whatever, and go, man, how much is it going to tow or cost from you just tow my car back to my house? And we tell them, this is how much it is. This is our rates, whether it's a Bloomington Police Department or whether it's for Indiana State, Ellisville, whoever. And we say $125, and they're going, oh my gosh, I don't have that. What do you have? Man, I got $60 to my name. Where do you live? I'm probably going to take it to their house for $60 if that's what they got. Because I promise you, for us to go through paperwork and follow the guidelines that the state puts in front of us to acquire disposal liens to get rid of the car that we don't own, that's been abandoned in our lot, to acquire all this information and the time that takes 60 to 90 days for us to acquire that we now have to make room in our lot for these cars, it's cheaper, simpler, and easier for everyone to let them have their car back and move on our way. Go on about to the next one. They give us $60. Generally, I would probably just give that to my driver, and I will wipe it away. That's just how I do business. And more than likely, if you pulled each one of these guys up here, they're going to tell you that's exactly what happens at their lot as well. Okay? These rates that we're asking for you tonight are just to simply keep us honest. No different than the other departments and everybody else does. It keeps everybody honest. You guys have already seen on the private towing how the rate fees are astronomical. The fees in which they ask these people to pay is out of hand. And I am very excited to see that you guys are going to address this at a later time. And I think you have a gentleman right here that is very eager to get in that with you. If you guys ever want an opinion or anything, you're welcome to call me. I will give you that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your information.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yeah, for all those reasons, wouldn't you also confess that you might let her take that back because you're a pretty nice guy?
No.
You wouldn't let that out of the bag, would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask, I know by experience you also tow people that park illegally.
At the what?
That park illegally, isn't that part of the towing process too?
I park illegally?
No, you tow people who park illegally.
Park illegally, yes.
I had that experience not long ago.
Yes,
we
I
had
did.
a conversation.
If an officer deems that it's parked illegally, not my opinion that it's parked illegally.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. That you're always called by an officer.
Yes.
And then you tow.
And then we tow it. That's
Yep,
correct.
That's fair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public on ordinance 1907. If there's any public comment, step up. Seeing no public comments, we'll come back to council for final comment and a recommendation. Councilmember Sandberg.
Last week, we got to hear about the important work that you do and the safety issues, and that you're actually now kind of considered first responders, and I found that to be educational and interesting. I was grateful to get that background. And tonight, we hear that you often are called on to act as social workers, and so I'm also equally informed by that. It kind of sparks some other thoughts about, again, low-income individuals who find themselves in difficult situations, and and looking at working harder and falling behind. These are tough calls that you all have to make. You have to make your livings, but then there are some people out there that have it pretty tough, and so I appreciate your empathy and your kindness with respect to those situations. So thank you. I'll be in support.
Thank you. Other council comment? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I, too, want to thank everyone for their comments. The reason I asked the question earlier, and let's just face it, I mean, many of us up here, we're pretty well blessed. You need to tow my car, I'm going to call AAA or somebody else, and we're just going to get it done. Many people in our community do not have that luxury, and I think from our standpoint, from a progressive policy standpoint, that we have to look deeper than that. And I am satisfied with the answers that we've talked about and we have for a couple weeks, and I appreciate it. But that was the genesis of my questions. We can do certain things, but they have to be right for as many as we can. So thank you very much, and I will support this as well.
Thank you. Other council comment? I'll just say thank you, Mr. Hooker, for bringing forward this housekeeping measures, and thank you all for your patience this evening. It was a bit longer than we anticipated. So with that, would someone like to call the question?
Call the question.
Okay, the question's been called and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Ruff?
Yes.
Chopra?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
Volin? Oh, Sims?
Yes.
Sturbaum?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The ordinance 1907 is adopted 8-0. Thank you very much.
That was
Okay.
7-0.
Pardon me?
7.
7-0. I'm sorry, I forgot. We're missing 2. 7-0.
It did tow me.
And by the way, the committee recommendation last time was 7-0-0. It wasn't 5-0-3. That was a mistake.
Yeah,
All right, there is no legislation for first reading. We have time for additional public comment for those who haven't spoken. Okay. Now we'll go to council schedule. Mr. Sherman, we have a work session potentially.
One of them think will generate a lot of interest, and that's the regulation of shared use scooters. And the other has to do with appropriation of funds that reverted at the end of last year. So first, do you want to, who will be able to attend that meeting?
Show of hands.
I think so.
Okay, looks like we've got at least 4 people.
Also, because I think we may see a number of people because of the scooter ordinance is going to be scheduled in this room. We'll put a table in the middle of the room, microphone, so you can still have an informal conversation.
Very good. So that will be noon, Friday the 22nd, in this room.
Also, I want to thank those of you who have submitted amendments for the transportation plan. Responsibility of the board, this is the plan on it. This is first amendments.
Very good. Anything else, Mr. Sherman? All right. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.